Hello and welcome to the second day of our OpenUp HR Summit, where we will continue our 4-day exploration of mental well-being in the workplace. Today, our focus will be on non-desk workers, where we will explore effective strategies to support their mental and physical well-being, ensuring that they feel valued and connected in your organization. My name is Emma White. I'm a psychologist at OpenUp, and I will be your host during the summit. And in our studio today, I am joined by...
Thank you. My name is Sophie. I work for Rituals and I'm the Global Wellbeing Manager, which means that we are trying to bring our well-being brand to our employees in the offices and the stores on a daily basis.
I'm Jeroen Kuiper. I'm Director of Customer Success at OpenUp. What that means is that I'm responsible for our customers. With our team, we try to make sure that our customers get the most value from OpenUp, and I'm excited to be here today.
And my name is Josanne, and I'm responsible for HR in G-Star, the denim company.
Well, a very warm welcome, Josanne, Jeroen, and Sophie. Thank you for being here today, and I'm also very excited to be having this discussion, and of course to also addressing any of your questions coming in as listeners. Okay, so let's kick off our discussion, and I wanted to start with kind of laying the land of the importance of what we're talking about today. So to what extent do you believe that investing in the mental well-being of non-desk workers can contribute to the long-term success and sustainability of the organization? Sophie, can I start with you?
Yes, sure. So I truly believe that happy and engaged and healthy, also mentally healthy employees are really the fundament of every organization. And especially non-desk workers for us are the biggest population that we have in the organization. So yeah, but when we would not focus on them, I think we would lose a lot of potential of Rituals. And in stores is where our matching happens. So if you are happy, you also transfer that to the customer that's entering the store. So, yeah, I really believe if you invest in non-desk workers and make sure that they feel seen and feel heard and understood, that really contributes to their well-being and in the end to the customer experience.
Yeah, so it's not only just important; it is necessary.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that it's really necessary. And it's really the fundament of the organization, the people part. So, to me, it's key in everything that I do.
And what about for you, Jeroen?
Yeah, well, looking at our customers, we can see that investing in their well-being is something they consciously choose to do, right? So when they start with OpenUp, they're already on the right path. It's essential that there's a strategy in place, and if that strategy is there, then that's the first step that a company can take. What you can see with non-desk workers also applies to other kind of workers, right? So they're people that want to be heard and want to be seen, and if you as a business put the right things in place in order to facilitate that, we had a little conversation before already. Before we started, you can very quickly see that there are challenges, right, that are imposed when it comes to well-being. Talking about well-being is something that still has quite a stigma. So if you can address that has impact on well-being and long-term success. Yes.
And what about for you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Sophie and Jeroen. It's very important to address it. For us, non-desk workers are also a big part of the population, although we also have a lot of desk workers. And what we have done in 2 years ago is really to make the topic of mental health a topic that is just very normal to discuss. So we made it an integral part of the performance cycle, and where you can talk about your next step in the company or your professional or personal development. You can also speak about your mental health, and that's for us. It's also very important to open the space to have that discussion, but it's not easy.
No, and that brings me indeed to my next question or topic that I'd like to address, and I've heard a little bit from you, Jeroen, and then also from you, is that yes, it's incredibly important, it's necessary, especially if the majority of your workforce is non-desk workers, but also on the element of just the human side, that even if you're a desk worker or a non-desk worker, mental well-being is incredibly important. But it's one thing knowing it's important to then actually making it important. And I can imagine that along the way, there are challenges, like you were just saying, Josanne. So what challenges have you encountered in promoting the well-being of non-desk workers? How are they, in your opinion, different from desk workers? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I can start. Well, they're different because they're very different populations. So, for example, if we look at the needs of our warehouse employees, they are very different than the needs, for example, of our young store employees or our professional office employees. So for us it's important to really listen to or survey also what is needed, look at the frequency and the reasons for sickness, for example, and then really tailor the programs you make. For example, in our warehouse, we are very much focusing on quitting smoking, healthy food habits, and physical exercise, physical complaints. Whereas in the stores, it's also physical complaints, but it's also a lot of young people that maybe have financial issues, and so it's for us it's really important to listen to what that group specifically needs.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I also think that the restrictions or the context of non-desk workers obviously is different. At Rituals, we believe that our strategy in terms of well-being is that you need to unify body, mind, and soul. So we see that for all employees, but the focus is slightly different for our non-desk workers because their work is a lot more physical. So there we need to focus on also getting the physical aspects and the physical basics right. So heavy lifting and good shoes are kind of the first basics that we need to look into also. Of course, for people at the office, they're sitting behind the desk. There, the physical aspect is different. So I think the context is also different, and that's why the solutions and the focus in first instance is slightly altered from between the desk and non-desk workers. And also there are some what I meant restrictions, like we know that flexibility has a huge impact on well-being or mental well-being. And of course, for non-desk workers, that's a little bit more difficult to provide that flexibility in their scheduling, for example. But there are certain things that as an employer you can do. So really looking into ways to provide that flexibility between certain boundaries, I think also is important. So coming back to your point, really looking at the needs of employees, of non-desk employees.
Although I think the mental health issue is similar across all groups. So
true.
And for us it's just really important to make the topic discussable, to open up, to stay within the context, to really because that's the same for everyone. Just ask how someone is doing. You know.
Yeah, so what we're seeing as similarities between desk workers and non-desk workers is definitely the mental aspect. But if we look specifically at non-desk workers, what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that there's this large physical aspect to well-being as well, that the context is different. So what you were saying is it's really important to listen, to understand what are the unique challenges that you can make these tailor-made solutions for these non-desk workers.
Yeah, and also because also the aim is different. For example, in our stores, people tend to stay not super long. I mean, we have a lot of students working in our stores for a couple of years, whereas in a warehouse we have people that retire after a very long tenure. So also the goal of supporting their well-being is different. So that's also an aspect to look at.
Yeah, what I also found interesting what you were saying was to make it more discussable, to make it something that is openly discussed. Is that a strong difference that you see between desk workers and non-desk workers? With non-desk workers, it has a higher need to be discussed?
Well, I can take this one. So I started my career in recruitment and talent attraction for a large engineering company. So I spent quite some time at construction sites, different kind of projects, from very high skilled work to less skilled work. But there's definitely one common denominator, and that is that you don't really talk about your issues, right? And it's all about just continuing, and we are here and we are going to do the job, right? And we're going to push forward. And I think that breaking that habit is something that's very, very important, and that you can only do by really being consistent. So reaching your entire population, or your employee base, right? That's not always easy if you are having a different way of communicating with each audience. If you're in the store, you won't be able to check your email constantly, right? So you'll need to adapt to that.
Yeah. So indeed, a different approach from understanding the needs and the unique challenges. And I'm wondering, based on the challenges that you've just shared, what kind of approaches or examples do you have of how you've addressed these unique challenges? Who would like to take this one?
What examples?
Yes.
Well, just as I just said, I think in the warehouse, the example was that we really saw the need for quitting smoking courses. And actually, people were first, of course, a bit reluctant, but then really wanted to join. And also, we were able to make them aware of the need, because some colleagues fell ill, for example, or sick, or long-term sick, or have quite heavy complaints. So I think, that's an example where we kind of listened to what the need and took action.
And when you identify this need for something regarding quitting smoking, what do you then do? Is it then you just set up a course, or do you just say, hey, this is an important topic, here is a budget, and go and find something for it? How did you approach this?
Well, in this case, yes, it was setting up a course.
Setting up a course, yeah.
But sometimes it's, of course, not so easy, but it all depends on the needs.
And what was the impact that you saw from the course?
Well, I have to say I wasn't involved into that detail, but what I heard was that the results were quite good.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what examples do you, either of you, maybe have with regards to how you've addressed these unique challenges?
Yeah, so we have various things that we apply, but there also we look into, for example, what are the difference in regions? What do the different regions need? For example, in the more northern regions, it's a lot darker than we have in the southern part of Europe. So what can we also do to support employees there? In the northern part, we are trying out some new things also with UV lamps to see what would work for them. So sometimes it's also just a bit trial and error to see what works, what's the impact, and what does not work. One thing that we changed that was not so much related to mental well-being but to physical well-being was the shoes of the store employees. So it can be like really these kind of, for us, subtle changes that make a huge impact on employees. And I think also, for example, we also have OpenUp, and in every country we have a similar provider. It's really the repetition, so repeating how important it is,
I agree.
and trying to get that threshold to make use of the external providers as low as possible. And I believe that that's really something that we, in a broader sense, in retail and in other organizations, really need to focus on how can we make sure that belief that you get help when you're sick, for example, or you use a psychologist like you. If there's really something bad happening, how can we kind of remove those really fundamental beliefs, not only in organization but in society, so that these conversations get part of our culture.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, to make it more accessible, really.
Yeah, exactly.
That it doesn't only warrant a conversation when something's really bad.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You also do that to build up your resilience. So last week we focused really on resilience. So do something before it gets really busy. We have really seasonal work. So for us in November, December, it's really busy in the stores. So how can we also prepare our employees for that busy season and not only make sure that they take care of themselves during, but also before? And OpenUp would be an option also to get yourself ready.
And sometimes it's also very simple. I remember this this case where we asked the question, how is your mental state in a performance cycle? And something came out like, I'm just very insecure about my job. I don't know if I will be here next year. And what happened was that person just didn't really know what was going on, in the retail environment. And by just taking him on the journey, explaining to him, it was all solved. So it was in the end quite easy. but it would not have come up if we wouldn't have asked that question. Because managers find it very difficult, it's at least my experience, for both desk workers but also for non-desk workers in the store, for example, to really ask a question, how are you really? Because most one-to-ones or conversations happen to go on the job, what's going on, how do we increase the performance, and not really about the person. So by just asking the question, we could solve this particular example quite easily.
Yeah. And what kind of initiatives or programs or things have you tried to, because we're talking about lowering the threshold, making it more accessible. I'm curious, besides, of course, the question, how are you, and asking that to each other and hoping it will trickle it down, what other things have you tried or experimented with to lower the threshold to talk about how they're really doing?
Yeah, we do some manager training as well, especially on, for example, undesired behavior in the workplace. And I also believe that HR should really move more to a more coaching role, where you can really speak with managers to address this and go on over their teams and check on the issues and then coach them in how to approach it. That's at least what we've done so far.
Yeah. And to me, it's really difficult. So I find that, I think, the most difficult part.
Yeah.
And it's to really, make sure that threshold is lower. So I would love to have the golden answer to it, but I don't. So so indeed, the managers play the crucial role. We also talked about the role of our area managers. But it's really difficult to show that having an open-up conversation, for example, or that genuine, honest conversation with your manager is something that's normal. So I think repetition, manager training. But happy to hear what the best possible solution is to it. Because for me in my well-being role, I find this the most challenging.
I can imagine, and it sounds like a very challenging role also to be in, and I think that's also why we're here, because it's a challenge, and what can we also learn from each other here. And I'm curious, Jeroen, also from your role, and you talk a lot with managers and with HR as well, what do you see as things that have helped addressing these challenges?
Yeah, in general, working with leaders, that is what really sets it apart. A manager has a team and they speak to their team on a regular basis, so we can see that a lot of managers don't feel equipped to actually take care of the well-being of their employees. Of course, they cannot do it that fully, but they can look out for that. So training managers is something that's really important. And it's also, if you don't feel equipped as a leader, you also induce stress from that yourself, right? So you have a team and your team is not doing well, but you get stressed from that as a leader. So that's something that companies should really address. And
that's also a trend. Managers are getting more and more stressed out themselves because of all the expectations and all the things they need to do.
Yeah, so that
from the company, but also from their teams. Yeah,
absolutely. So expectation setting also for leaders. What is great? What does good look like? What does great look like? Those are models that, if they are in place, that gives a lot of calm. And if you have the resources in order to get and develop your leaders, that is a mega differentiator.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you add to the conversation is really having those clear expectations for the managers, and also not just the managers, but also the leaders of the managers, and having them train and taking them along, so you can also have this like top-down, trickle-down effect to everybody who's also working within the company.
We can even see that if we have a new implementation, right? If we have an executive presence and someone who is sponsoring well-being, and they're talking about well-being on a regular basis, we can see 60% increased activation, which is tremendous.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's huge. It's okay for me to talk about this, right? Our leader is open about it.
Yeah, and in that example, you see the importance of a leader to be aware of their own beliefs, or we call them also mental models. Mm-hmm. Because if you, for example, believe yourself that making use, for example, of OpenUp is really something that you only should use when you're sick, you also share that also maybe unconsciously with your employees. So being aware, okay, that's my own mental model or my own belief, and trying to maybe not change that, but looking at ways to prevent that from being brought to your employees, I think that's really important, and to be a lot more self-aware as a leader in the impact that you have on your employees.
Yeah, so it's really that leading by example and being aware of that.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about leaders and leadership, how can leadership ensure that the well-being of non-desk workers is prioritized and embedded into the organizational culture? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I always start with making visible how much sickness costs.
So the data,
because obviously that has a big impact on the organization, and even for leaders who are not so involved with well-being on a daily basis, then it still becomes an important topic. So that helps. But it referred to the previous point. Leading by example really is the only way, I would say.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, and I believe you need to have a strategy for your entire workforce, right? So not only for one part of the workforce. If you work for a company and they invest in the whole company and they invest in every single person, I believe that shows, right, in engagement, in satisfaction numbers. If you feel like you're not being invested in, you're much more likely to consider a job elsewhere. So I think that's very important to look at that holistically and set something up for that. That doesn't mean that you will do the same for everyone, right? But at least that you know that you want to take care of certain elements in the business, and you don't want to offer something that doesn't suit an audience, right? That's not feasible, I think.
Yeah, so in a way it's from the kind of listening and understanding and bringing that into the leadership strategy of the company is the first steps to make sure it is prioritized and it is addressed, and the data that you were mentioning is vital in also demonstrating the importance of it.
On the same time, I wouldn't wait until it's part of the strategy, because it's also a big thing. So I would also really work with those managers that are in day-to-day contact with all the people, because they are able to make an impact. So if you just equip them with the right tools and verbally, but also programs, then that's helping.
So long term, it's a strategy, and shorter term is addressing it through the key role that the managers play.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning you need to push it a bit into the organization, make it really, kind of mandatory, like you mentioned, in the performance cycle, in different aspects, in team meetings. And then after a while, when it's becoming more part of the culture, I think you can start to pull a bit more instead of pushing, taking as HR also a step backwards, and seeing what happened. For me, the ultimate goal is that my role is not needed anymore. So, but yeah, now to get it really into the organization, you need to have make things really tangible and also mandatory to push it into it.
You sound like a psychologist, because what we always say, we want to get the clients to a place that they don't need us anymore. But at the first, it does take more conscious effort and practice and keeping it on top of the agenda. That is really what's needed to make it a priority.
Yeah, I agree. I have a background in psychology, so maybe that's coming
that's
from
why,
there.
That's why.
I have to say that in my experience, though, so far, what I see is that just having a conversation and meaningful connections brings more than another yoga class on a Wednesday morning. So I'm not so into these nice activities anymore, because I don't think that's really going to make a difference. Yeah. So that's my, well, maybe revised experience. Or
so it's the power of having that meaningful conversation that we shouldn't underestimate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you can follow up tailor-made, but I believe that's
100% agree. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool evolution, right? If you look at, say, a 10-year span, what's happened from the ping pong table to having meaningful conversation. Yeah.
Well, the ping pong table can still help to build a connection. To build a connection together outside or more informal, that enables you then to have a more meaningful connection. So that still helps, but in a different way than when you go have a bootcamp class once a week, for example.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
And talking about connection, how can you ensure that non-desk workers feel included and connected to the broader team, despite the unique nature of their roles? What strategies have you maybe found effective here?
Well, shall I start? I don't want to start all the time. Again, it starts really with the manager. So if we look at the stores, the role of the store manager is very important there, because that person should, for example, when it comes to communication and training, should be the one who is cascading it down to the team members. And above that, store manager is then the district manager. So here again, maybe your ultimate goal is to make yourself redundant, but my ultimate goal is to make HR as invisible as possible, because I think really the manager is the one who's the most important part of an employee's life cycle in an organization. So by really focusing on those managers, I think you're most able to connect non-desk workers with the rest of the organization, especially in terms of communication. Just posting messages on an internet is not enough.
No. And when we're talking about focusing on managers, what do we want them to focus on? What do we want to train them in? What should the focus be on?
For me, it's taking the full responsibility of their employees. So we make them really responsible for recruitment. Obviously, we give them the tools. And we join an interview to kind of give a guidance, but they are ultimately responsible for making the decision who they want to hire. So they also feel responsible to make it a success for the engagement. So for me, that's really making them accountable to make an employee's life successful.
So you're really playing into their autonomy, but also their competency as well.
Yes.
Yeah. What about for you, Jeroen? What do you see?
I still wanted to ask maybe one follow-up question.
No, go ahead.
So how do you measure that? Because I'm very interested in this topic, because I fully believe what you believe, right? So I fully believe that it's a life cycle, and you are responsible as a manager for the success of your people, good and bad, right? And in their well-being. So is that something you track?
No, well, not specifically. We don't track specifically that, but obviously you can tell from surveys, but also turnover. But also the way they interact with us in HR. You know, and for example, we have very different experiences when it comes to recruitment with different managers. Some really own it, and some really don't own it. So, and then you start to talk to them and to help them, etc. So we don't specifically track it, but obviously you have a lot of tools to measure it.
Thank you.
Satisfied.
Does it answer your
Yeah,
question?
no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I asked this just purely out of interest because if you have a model where you can see the performance of a manager, right, and you have their expectations that are laid out, and you know what they should do. If you can measure that, then you can also keep them more accountable.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel it's still quite holistic.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to find the holy grail here. Like how can that be operationalized?
Yeah.
I think surveys are a good way to do
Yeah,
this.
but it's also just on the spot. For example, if a manager doesn't really own a recruitment process,
Yeah.
we won't hire anyone. So in
Yeah.
the end, he or she will feel the pain, right? So and then we can really start to help him. Hey, but you need to take a decision. You need to review this. You need to speak to people. Because we're not going to do it. Because I don't want to hire somebody that he feels that he didn't hire himself.
Yeah.
Or herself.
That makes
Yes,
sense.
so it's a lot to do with the behavior that you're seeing happening in the day-to-day, maybe also more the qualitative side of measuring that's important here. Coming back to the question that you asked.
And I think that in the ideal world, you would really like that you are able to see which leaders are performing good on different aspects. Business impact is really important in your results, etc. But if you can create a team that's more engaged, that will contribute to the business results. So if you can find a method how you can really score that and track that over time, then you can also find the more suitable solutions to improve what the team really needs.
Yeah.
That's what sparked my interest.
Didn't crack that code yet, but it's you. I'm aligned with you.
What are your thoughts on this, Sophie, when we're talking about wanting employees or non-desk workers to feel connected to the broader team? You know, some of them are working in shops or in other locations, maybe different than the headquarters. What do you see that's needed or that you do to ensure that they feel included and connected to the broader organization?
Yeah, I think the pitfall is to make that gap bigger and bigger by making really different kinds of approaches. And I think you already mentioned is to make one strategy for all employees. So and try to focus on the similarities instead of the differences. So we are trying to have similar sessions that we organize for employees in the offices, also for the employees in the stores. Maybe I should even say it the other way around. But yeah, so to have one strategy, and of course there are differences and nuances in that strategy. As I said before, the physical well-being aspect is different. But we really try to make sure that we offer the same things or similar things for the stores as for the office employees. That's really a lesson that I learned, to have one strategy for.
Yeah, so it's in a way having the same strategy with the similarities being the most important. And then within that framework, having the flexibility to bring in nuances based on the specific needs that you see.
Yeah, translating that strategy into like practical interventions. Those interventions will probably be slightly different, but they are also, like you said also before, mental well-being is really similar for all employees. So then you can also look into translating the strategy into similar interventions. Having sessions for moms returning from maternity leave, like these kind of things. Doing that for non-desk and desk workers. I think that helps to show we're doing that for all of you.
Yeah, for all of them. And if we're looking towards the future, what trends do you foresee in the future with regards to well-being support for non-desk workers? And how should or how could our listeners or HR professionals prepare for this?
Well, I think the mental health issue is one to stay. So we also know that the Gen Z is more experience more mental health issues. Also expects from employers that they take action on it, or that at least there is room for this. So we all know that. I think that is a trend that is there to stay, and I think then it will also trickle down to non-desk workers. So that's one thing I would call out. The discussion about mental health.
I think that's even going to be like mental health is going to be even more important than ever with all the diseases and all the challenges regarding mental health coming up. So I really see like a huge red flag there.
Yeah, especially with all the younger generation that are suffering from depressions and burnouts already. They will enter the workforce at some point in time. It's not something that will then disappear. So I think that's becoming more and more important.
So unfortunately here to stay because it needs to, and we're expecting it to become a bigger and bigger challenge than it already is. And what can HR professionals then do to prepare for this, do you think?
For me, it's creating this space where you can have a discussion about it. So an open culture, and unfortunately, we're not there yet. I mean, this is in the world. I mean, I'm not talking about our organization specifically, but in the world, it's still a little bit of a taboo to speak about it. So I hope at some point we can break that. On the other hand, it's also becoming more and more difficult to have a conversation because we're all distracted by screens. I read a nice article in a newspaper a couple of weeks ago about in the city here in Amsterdam where everyone is just walking with their headphones on and their phone in their hand, that there's no more room for a nice conversation with your neighbor. And I think that's a trend we need to break through. And hopefully we as HR professionals can make a little bit of impact by opening up the space in organizations to have these conversations.
I think it's really important what you're mentioning. I also recently read an article from psychiatrists and psychologists, and they were talking about that it just seems like we've all forgotten how to really connect with each other. And that if we can focus more on that as a society, that would make all of the difference, because we're meant to support each other. We're meant to help each other. That's how we have thrived. But now we seem to have gotten to this place that it's just us and our screens and our headphones and how are you? Yeah, good. But not really, how are you?
No.
So I think that's a really important one that you're mentioning, that HR then has an important role or has the potential to play an important and enabling role in.
I'm not saying it's easy.
No, definitely not, but it's important.
Yeah, I agree. I think mental well-being or mental health topic is here to stay, 100%. We have more generations than ever in the workforce, right? So that requires more attention to different types of communication styles, and it will keep popping up. I think we also will see some pretty maybe out there ideas, or trends, like maybe wearables will become a thing, like especially if you're working in warehouses, etc. If you work in warm environments, tracking health, etc. via devices. I believe that will become a thing. But more than ever, what can you do today? Create that space. Do it now, so you don't have to do it later. If you start now, you can do a lot more with that later. So, fully agree on that space that you have to really keep hammering on that.
The multi-generational one is also is a difficult aspect there. I also sometimes have conversations with older employees that are like, he shouldn't complain, right? I mean, and then how do you kind of, I get it, but at the same time, world has changed. So how do you really get that across the table? Is quite a difficult conversation. If
you look at 10 years ago versus now, also so many more companies became international. Right now, it's okay to hire people that don't maybe speak Dutch or speak other languages. It's okay. We kind of are speaking English universally, but more cultures. It will only become more. There will become more cultures in our business environment, and that's also something to cater for. And that's quite similar, I think, to the generations. That's also cultural, but even making more inclusion will also be important in businesses. I believe. Yeah.
And I think that's the similarity also between well-being and diversity and inclusion, that sense of belonging, but also those unconscious biases that we always bring to the table as a manager, as an employee. And that's becoming bigger and bigger. But as you said, like a manager saying, yeah, but there's no problem, he should stop complaining. That's all about these convictions that are so strong in different generations, cultures, etc., that we should become more aware of, I think.
Yeah, so in a way also becoming more aware of our belief systems when it comes to different generations in the workforce, different cultures, different languages. It sounds like we are expecting the workforce to become more complex than it maybe already is. So it's important to take all of these things into account when preparing for the future of well-being in the workforce. I see a lot of questions coming in from our listeners. Shall we move on to see those questions? So thank you for everyone answering or for asking the questions, and keep them coming. We'll try and answer as many as we can. So Alexia asks, what is your advice to improve communication with non-desk workers without email addresses? Who wants to take this one? Jeroen, you have a big smile on your face. You go.
I knew you were going to ask me. I think, you have to think about your situation, right? Your particular challenge you're trying to solve. So if you have a company where there is no access to email, you're going to have to try and be visible in those locations or moments when there are interactions with your employees. So either be very simple offline promotional material, making sure there's presence during events. You have to find something that suits them. And probably, if you ask the question, you will know better how your employees can be reached. Right? So I don't think there's a wrong there. Right? You can try different things and see what works. That would be.
There are also multiple apps specifically designed. I think you use kind of the same as we do. That also are accessible without a company email address. The only thing that I have experienced is that you need to make sure that there is a lot of interaction on the apps, because otherwise it will kind of silently die. But there are many tools to reach your employees. But also the offline visibility, I agree, is also important. Still.
Interesting. Moving on. Linda asks, I can imagine in large organizations, non-desk workers don't feel connected to HR at the headquarter level. How do you create a culture of well-being for this group when many of them are dispersed? Do you want to take this one, Sophie?
Yeah, so I think there it's coming back again to the managers. Also the HR advisors. So we see that HR advisors go continuously in going to the locations. I think that's really important. We also have a channel that we use to communicate between HR globally and people in the stores. They can use that if they have any challenges specifically. And the managers are really also our kind of cultural ambassadors. So that should be their first point of contact if there's something, a question or anything HR related. And otherwise, we try to make that connection between an HR advisor and the store as small as possible. The connection as strong as possible.
The distance is small and the connection is strong.
Exactly. But also, like we have that app also to share like global, not only policies but inspiration, etc., to show that things that we're doing here in Amsterdam is applicable to everyone all over the world. So I think that also helps to bridge that gap, which obviously is there. But I think the HR advisors and the managers play a crucial role.
Yeah, so it's also using different channels and different people to get the same message across.
I think for the non-desk workers, like using all the available channels, offline, online, events, managers, the back of the house in the store. So I think it's really important to repeat and use all of these channels and be aware also of the impact of these channels. What works best for what information is important.
Yeah, good one. Thank you. Any additional thoughts from the both of you?
No, I would also say managers. So yeah, totally aligned.
Okay, then Amy asks, Sophie mentioned helping the teams build resilience, particularly in the winter months. What kind of strategies were used for this? I think you talked about the lighting, the bulbs, or the LED
UV lights.
The UV lights.
Yeah. Also, they're making the conversation about resilience part of different channels. So we have made it part of local events that prepare them for the busy season, showing easy examples on how can you build up resilience, making it really practical, using 1, 2, 3 examples that say, okay, this is what you can do to build resilience, and then also repeating that in the different channels that we have. Focusing on those really busy months and the months before. I think repetition is key.
Keeps coming back. Yeah, good one. Then Rosie asks, how do you best check in on the well-being of non-desk workers? Josanne, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, again, I would say this is really a manager duty. So it's our task to really equip the managers, but also keep talking to the managers that, hey, how's your team doing? How is this and this person doing? So, again, cascade this through area managers, district managers, and then store managers, and visit every now and then as well. And there are also, of course, tools to predict, for example, sickness. So with our company doctor, we have some tools in place that, 2 sickness notifications are already assigned to start looking at a specific person, and 3 is really a red flag. So these tools are also in place, and we need to monitor that.
Yeah, so managers, we keep hearing back. It's making me think that managers have a very difficult job as well, next to our roles too. But then also different tools that can be helpful here as well.
Yeah, and that's mainly around data, just reviewing data.
And just to make it really concrete, do you have any example of tools?
Well, we don't use it yet, but I had the pleasure of hosting an event on HR tech last week, and one of the startups that had a pitch there was a tool where it was AI based, I believe, and they tracked conversations throughout the organization. So on Teams, on Slack, on WhatsApp, on whatever, and from those conversations, they were able to track if there was a high risk of sickness.
Oh wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, very fascinating. Yeah, I was also really, really impressed. And also the purpose of this startup was really nice. It came from a personal experience in the depression, whatever. It was a really, really nice story. But I think with AI, those tools are becoming more and more available. So maybe it sounds a bit clinical and a bit data driven, but I think that it can make a difference in the end to look at data. Yeah, in a predictive way.
Then Kini asks, we invest heavily in vitality, employee satisfaction, and well-being through training, healthy food, sports facilities, and meaningful conversations. However, many colleagues, especially juniors, seem to take these benefits for granted. Yeah. How can we help them better appreciate and join these initiatives? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I recognize that.
I think all of you do. I can also see you smiling. Did you go first?
So for me, really making what we all do more tangible. So for next year, I created that well-being strategy, body, mind, and soul, and then the definition of what does that mean, and really showcasing in the communication, in events, etc., what all relates to that. And many people always say, but we do. So managers often say, but we do already a lot around well-being, and employees say, but do we do a lot of well-being? So there's a huge gap in perception. So for me, I don't have the solution, but for me, it's really like really communicating to employees, this is what we already all do. But yeah.
Yeah, I also wonder if you really should continue with all those company-wide things, because this society really asks for individual solutions. So I'd rather invest more in the meaningful conversations and follow up on an individual basis in case that's needed, than offering large company-wide programs that actually nobody really values, and probably also nobody really misses.
Yeah. On the other hand, like the gym subscription, as mentioned in the question, and also the healthy food and lunch. Yeah, I see that also as
That's a basic thing.
thing, as a fundament. So I think just making sure that that's there. Yeah, nowadays I think you just need that as a basis. I understand that it's a lot of investment, but if you don't do that,
I wonder if people really leave for that.
Yeah, it does give you maybe a competitive advantage in the sense that people don't have to worry about these things, right? So I think in the question, taking it for granted, that's difficult, right? Because I think that it's okay maybe if it's taken for granted, which may be a bold statement, but you want people to worry about their work, right? And to solve challenges at work and be the best at work. And if they get good, healthy food, right, and they don't need to think about what am I going to eat, that's going to contribute to them having worry less. Of course, you should appreciate what you have, right? And often you only know what you don't have after you had it, and then you don't have it anymore. And I do recall I spent 7 years at LinkedIn. Right, and there everything was taken care of. Right? It was very, very well organized. And there also I heard, that we don't have this and we don't have this, but we had everything, right? But what they did incredibly well was the team that made that all happen. Every year they were in the spotlight in several moments. So they did things according to the seasons. And the whole company really showed gratitude for what they taken care of for all of us. And then you see what it takes to get that done. So what does it take in order to facilitate that? It's a mega lift. It's a mega lift, right? To take care of the food, to take care of all this subscriptions, gym, whatever you offer. And that's something that, if you don't see all the work that's being done there, that's hard to then maybe relate to that or understand what does it all take to organize that. And I think also if you think about another question we earlier had, which was about how can you make sure that non-desk workers feel connected to the wider company and connected with HR, etc. I think that's about contribution again. Like what is the impact of your work and how does this contribute to our company goals? I think that's a similar scenario where recognizing the work has impact on the feeling that it brings to someone.
Interesting. So it's a combination of different things. On the one hand, it sounds like there's certain things that just need to be in place, whether it's, for example, having a healthy lunch at work. But then there's also this bigger and bigger focus on things being tailored individually, what you were talking about, like what do they really need and making sure that you cater to that. And then for all the things that you do offer, to make sure that there is moments of gratitude and appreciation for what there is. And then also the elements of just repetition of what we do offer, so that they don't just take it for granted, but they realize, it is a privilege that they offer these things and we can be grateful for that.
Yeah. I think some elements are compensation and benefits, and some elements are really required because of well-being. So I try to distinguish between the two. Yeah. And that also helps me to see, okay, this is what we need from compensation and benefits parts. Am I adding that to the compensation and benefits, or am I adding this because I really feel that it's needed to improve the well-being of employees?
Yeah, so important to make the distinction
there.
there.
To me, it helps to prioritize.
Yeah, good addition. Thank you. Well, and this is what it is for today's session. So I'd like to wrap it up. Like I said at the beginning, when we were talking beforehand, the time does fly. So I want to say a big thank you for your insights, for your input. And it was a pleasure to discuss this important topic with you.
For having us.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. And of course, thank you for the listeners, also for being here and for your questions. This is what we've had for today, but we still have a mindfulness moment that we'd like to do together. So please stay tuned for a couple of more minutes. But for me and for us for now, a big thank you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, where we're going to be continuing our HR Summit, but then specifically into the role of managers with regards to well-being. So looking forward to that. I'll see you there. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the second day of our HR Summit. After another insightful panel discussion, it's time to reconnect with ourselves. Today's mindfulness session focuses on grounding and presence, a way to anchor ourselves in the here and now. In the midst of busy schedules and constant demands, it's essential to feel centered and connected to our bodies. Let's take this moment to root ourselves in the present so we can move forward with calm and clarity. Take a moment to find a relaxed and comfortable position. You can keep your eyes closed or leave them slightly open if you find this more comfortable. If you are sitting, place your feet on the floor. Try to sit up straight with an upright spine, but at the same time, soften your shoulders. To connect with the body, bring your attention to the points of the body that are in contact with the ground below, or the surface that you are sitting or laying on. Notice which body parts are touching the surface. This could be your back, or your arms against the chair, or your hands on the table. Really tune in to the contact points. If it helps you, you can gently press down so that you can sense them more intensively. Feel them from the inside out. And then we are already at the end of this short exercise. You can slowly start moving again. Stretch a little, and then open your eyes again. As we conclude this grounding exercise, take a moment to notice the sense of presence you've cultivated. Stay connected to this feeling as you continue through your day. Being grounded allows us to handle whatever comes our way with composure and confidence. Thank you for joining this session, and may your day be balanced and productive. See you tomorrow for another moment of mindfulness.